Problem is I have pansy feet and the water's kind of cold coming out of the mountain stream and all. So much winning.
After a summer of threatening to go camping together, my son and I were finally able to sync our schedules. It was probably the last weekend either of us had free before the fall kicks in. Often we'll do some backpack camping, but today we decided to use the canoe instead.
Keep paddling. Don't worry about me back here.
My wife and I had come camping here last fall, and we knew there was a great campsite at the end of the lake. A local said it was about 15 minutes by motorboat, an hour by canoe, and 2 hours if you decided to hike it.
There's a really nice campsite back up in there.
Oh, yeah?
There was a mild breeze, but it was enough to make steering a little difficult. This big old canoe is kind of like a sail. However, we were mostly able to keep it pointed in the right direction. Either way, we were sure enjoying the scenery.
Yeah.
Clearly the local hadn't accounted for my son being one of the paddlers. About 30 minutes of paddling, and we were at the end of the lake. The water was way higher than last year, but there was a nice sandy beach to land the canoe on.
45 minutes, and we had to stop and film along the way. So, but that wind was making the canoe squirrely. It's so wide, it's like a big sail, and so when you get crosswise of the wind, it'll take you all over the place. Or the guy in the back just can't steer.
The next order of business was to get our gear to the campsite and get camp set up. Our favorite camping arrangement is hammocks. My old back doesn't handle the ground very well, and so I find hammock camping way more comfortable than using a tent. After that paddle, I was slightly tempted to take a nap. In these mountains, even though there was no rain in the forecast, you definitely want to make sure you put a rain fly up. After inwardly complaining about packing all my gear up to the camp, I noticed this ant with a load about 10 times his size. He didn't seem to be complaining at all either. The next order of business was to get some fish in.
Sucker of some sort?
This year, the lake was pretty shallow from shore, so I decided to fish up the stream.
Dang, that's a raspberry jackpot. I'll be here for a minute.
I'm a sucker for wild berries, and these raspberries were about twice the size of your normal wild raspberries. Eventually, after no success on the stream, I made my way back to where the stream runs into the lake. The fish were starting to rise, so I figured I had a decent chance. I neglected to bring some waders, and so I resorted to the good old-fashioned roll-up-your-pants waders.
Just laying here in the water. Maybe we can keep this guy for dinner. Problem is I have pansy feet, and the water's kind of cold coming out of the mountain stream and all. Between the two of them, not a recipe for success.
Clearly, I suck at the roll-up-your-pants waders thing. My pants were way wetter now than if I'd just waded in them.
There he is. Yeah.
The fishing was pretty good. However, as I started adding fish to the net to keep for dinner, they one by one disappeared. Turns out, the net had more holes than it should.
Fishing's picked up. Get over here in the shade near dark. That one took it. That one took it.
After another couple casts, I was sure that the bite was on, so I went and grabbed my son. We decided to fish from the canoe, so neither of us would have to get wet anymore.
They are moving. Fish on. Nicely done.
Sweet.
Man, you keep catching big ones too.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
That one's not that big. Hey, big guy. Maybe I'm trying to help you out here. You gotta help your brother out.
Ah, dang you.
Get my boat. Get in the boat, kid. That's another nice one.
As the sun was setting, we'd secured a couple of fish for dinner. Now it was time to fry up some fresh rainbow trout. Like always, we ended up eating our dinner in the dark before turning in for bed. There wasn't a need to get up super early the next morning. With these tall mountains, it can be 9 or 10 o'clock before the sun hits the water. Before breakfast, I just had to take a walk along the lake and admire the beautiful views. For breakfast, we had one of our favorite meals, omelet in a bag, and you can't go wrong with Spam. After letting the omelets boil for 10 minutes or so, it was time for breakfast.
Totally dead.
With breakfast out of the way, we took the canoe back out and did some more. There were a lot of fish stacked up in the current, eating what the river was bringing them. As usual, my son had a couple of fish in the boat before I hooked my first one. We weren't planning on having fish for breakfast, but this one was working really hard to keep us from releasing him. They wouldn't take dry flies like the night before, so I ended up switching to a little woolly bugger. We fished for an hour or so, then it was time to pack up and head back home. It'll probably be a few months before we get to spend this much time together again, but we were both glad that we cleared our schedules and got a little camping in while the camping was good.